where are you from? Like they need to instantly either box you into a state or a language or a religion. People are still like super traditional, or there are people like me who maybe have moved around a lot. So for us, it's the joy of being multicultural. I was told by a person, by a mother of my own age, that oh, you're a stay-at-home mom, but your kids don't speak Hindi still. How is that possible?
Pops in a pod. Pops in a pod.
Hi, and welcome to Pops in a Pod. I'm Nadir Pop.
And I'm Peter Pop.
In the last episode, we spoke about third culture kids, and Peter, you spoke about your experience as one, right? And this week, joining us on the podcast is another third culture kid.
I'm very glad to welcome Aditi Wardhan Singh, the founder and chief editor of Rising World Children. Glad to have you on Pops in a Pod, Aditi.
Thank you. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Now, I purposely kept the introduction brief because when I was reading up on you, you wear many hats, and I don't think I would do justice to it. So, for all our listeners, if you could just quickly give them a brief introduction about yourself.
First of all, thank you so much. Of course, I'm so excited to be here. I am Aditi Wardhan Singh. I went from being a blogger to a freelance writer to founding Raising World Children because I felt that there were not enough people talking about cultural issues that we were facing in parenting. It started off as being a collaborative platform of over like 100 writers, and slowly it's evolved into this beast, I would say, where I'm hoping that we get can help produce more and more diverse stories, like the one I recently released, which is Amaya's Two Worlds. I have so far written 13 books myself and helped publish 5, and I edit multicultural books as well. And of course, I'm mother to 2 kids who are American and Indian. I don't say half half; they are completely and wholly Indian and completely wholly American. And I'm still living the third culture life.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. I mean, like, I have to give a shout out and mention Facebook communities, right? Because that's where my wife Karen actually came across you, and she said, "You know what, Peter, you have to get her on the podcast." And I think that's the beauty, at least, of social media, right? I mean, we can be sitting in 2 different countries, and before we hit record, actually, we were just bonding of our experience about being Gulfy kids, as I like to call us.
Yeah, for sure. I tell everyone, like a lot of people say that, oh, social media is not that great and it's addictive and all that. But I say all the success, whatever I would say I have had, is thanks to social media. With the connections I've made, I've met amazing people like you guys. I have found resources, I have found my tribe. And so I totally owe everything. I would not even know that I was a third culture kid without social media, because I got into this multicultural parenting thing, just sharing about my life. And slowly I got connected with all these other mothers and fathers who were around the world sharing their struggles and about being third culture kids or mixed race or biracial. And I was like, wait, this is a completely different world. And no one, I mean, people, I didn't know that I was a third culture kid till I heard the word.
I actually found my wife on social media, so I have a lot to be happy about social media. Although I'm not the most social person in the world, but yeah, thank you, social media, for that. And incidentally, she also happens to be from Kuwait.
Oh, wonderful. Kuwait is amazing. Not many people agree. Those who have been born and raised there, yes, it's amazing for many of us.
But you also, I mean, let me try and uh, you know choose the right words, and please forgive me if I sound extremely cliched, but let's say that you're Kuwaiti, right? And being in Kuwait, growing up in Kuwait, right? uh did you feel Indian, or did people make you feel Indian, or what was it like? Because you've already touched upon the whole aspect of third culture and social media kind of throwing you out there, right? So
Yeah.
what was it like being in that world?
So interestingly, I grew up in an Indian community. I went to a school which had Indian kids there. The only uh, I would say, segue into other cultures was when we went to someone's house, or when we went to the market, or when I started working, is when I got exposed to, oh, these are the different kind of people. Like, there are Egyptians living there, and there are other people who are coming from other parts of the Gulf. So honestly, growing up, I didn't even have a thought about, uh, am I Indian, am I this. Kids now think a lot more about it, but back when we were so busy studying, because our parents would be like, full time, just keep studying, that's what we used to do, so there was no time for anything else to even think about. But I have to say, and I know that Peter said not to talk about it, but since you brought it up, when I went to India was the first time, after the Gulf, after the invasion in Kuwait, is when someone asked me, it's like, where are you from? So I said, I'm, like, I didn't even understand the question. I was like, what? So they were like, no, so where are you from? Like, which state are you from? So I was like, okay, no, my mom is from Maharashtra and my dad is from Madhya Pradesh. And then she was like, no, no, but so, oh, it's a love marriage. I said, no, no, it's an arranged marriage. Like, I didn't even understand why this 10-year-old kid, why is she so bothered about where am I from? And that is when I realized, like, my thought process does not compute certain things which are, you know I don't know, foundationally Indian, you might say, to even think about a state, or to think about, like, even now when people ask me, where in India are you from, it's so difficult to answer them, because I've started saying, no, I'm from Kuwait. It just makes it easier.
I can so relate, and I was literally like at one point hard relate. I was saying is because in the previous episode when Nadir and I were talking, my experience was very similar. When I moved to India at the age of 6, somebody asked me, "Oh, you're the Dubai kid," because nobody even knew of Abu Dhabi back then, right? We're talking like early 90s, and I was like, "Okay, I'm the Dubai kid." And then like when you go abroad, you're like, oh, you're the Indian kid. So at some point, like that entire identity of who you are, and I think when you're young it doesn't really affect you so much, but say once you're in your teens or in your early 20s also, right, like that's when it really, because you were talking about a girl at 10 asking you, right, like my parents actually had a love marriage, both from completely different parts of India, completely different religions. So it's only like when I was much older did I comprehend a lot of what they went through back in the 80s. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But I have to ask you, right? And I know let's get all of these NRI stereotypes and all of that, right? Because especially now with social media, you have a lot of these memes and people making fun of them. So let's be honest, when you see another Indian mother or family and stuff like that, what's the thing that you react?
So yeah, so first of all, like I mentioned, even now people have to find that box like instantly, because for Indians, and this could be true of other communities to be honest, but I have seen it in Indians because that's the culture that I was raised in and I'm around. Is that where are you from? Like, they need to instantly either box you into a state or a language or a religion. I'm sorry to say, but for me, it's none of those things matter, because I grew up uh, in a family where my mom used to speak Marathi with her family, and we spoke Hindi at home, and English was my primary language. My first language is English, which people don't even realize. And For Indians, what I find interesting is that you have two types of Indians, right? One is like they're super Indian outside being out of India. Like, a lot of things I will say, people don't even know that in India, like, "Acha, are you still doing that?" People are still like super traditional, or there are people like me who maybe have moved around a lot. So for us, it's the joy of being multicultural. So we'll celebrate Navratri in our own way. Like, for me, Navratri, I'm celebrating by fasting it from my phone every evening, because of migraines, I can't fast anymore. I'm doing air quotes here, but yeah, so it's like that. So in my first book, Strong Roots Have No Fear, I said that there, if you try to hold on to tradition blindly, like just with your two hands grabbing it, it's like sand, because the kids now are so logical in their thinking that they're like, hey, if you don't have a reason for it, then why are we doing it? So which is what my thought is when I see people being super Indian. I'm calling it super Indian because there are normal people also.
Okay, so hang on. Then I have to ask you the next NRI stereotype.
Mhm.
Do you go first day first show for all the Bollywood movies when they release?
I have to. Otherwise, everyone on social media will share all the reviews now. It's crazy. Like I can't. I tell my husband I get panic attacks because if I want to watch a movie like Brahmastra, I went first day first show because I was like, if I wait for the next day, people are going to be sharing their opinion online, and I don't like it. And it's not even that opinion that matters. It's that they'll give spoilers now. Like, oh, this one is there and that one's there. So I just like, oh, please, I have to go first day just for that reason.
So, what you and Peter share in terms of being third culture kids, this is something that I think I have only experienced by other people. Right. Most recently, I think my wife, Peter, of course. But earlier, when I was much younger, back in college, I remember a very far off relative had come to India, right, and she looks as Indian as it could be, right? Like she could be walking on the streets and you wouldn't know, you couldn't tell whether she's from the suburbs or from town or whatever, but she was actually from Europe, so born and raised there and everything. And how do you know? When she speaks thick, very
Mhm.
very thick English accent, right? So she was telling me that when she went shopping and when the shopkeeper was trying to tell her the price of the product, she didn't understand because he just assumed she'll know Hindi, right? And she tried saying that I don't, I'm not from India. Like, can you imagine looking like an Indian and then you have to say that I'm not from India? I don't understand. And the shopkeeper thought that she like he was being mocked. And she's like, Nadir, I felt so betrayed, or rather it just felt as if he was being betrayed, that how dare you mock me, and how can you not, you look like a certain way but you can't kind of speak the language. Did you ever come across these kind of experiences because of the way you grew up and different cultures and countries and moving about? Did you always feel that people are looking
So
at you
how
very
long is your
differently?
podcast again? Because I don't know how, I don't know why. When I was in college, people could make out I was different. I now in retrospect, I think it was the things I used to wear because my wardrobe was from Kuwait, right? It was from a little bit more branded, I would say. Not that I knew what I even now I don't believe in brands, but my mom used to shop for me, and I used to wear those different kind of clothes and things like that. So I think that's one of the things, and of course the way I used to talk. So a couple of years into college, people would say that, oh, you sound very different. So I'm like, what? I don't think I have an accent at all. Like I haven't. She's like, but you don't sound Indian. I'm like, what? How does an Indian sound? Like Indian itself is like so many languages, and everyone has their own accent. But yeah, that's just how it is. I wanted to bring up, like, since we keep mentioning college, I have to tell you this stereotype. It was hilarious. My first, I think it was a second or third day in college, and I got introduced to this group of boys, and we sat down. And so this guy, someone asked me, so where are you from? Where have you come from? So I said I came from Kuwait, and this is like I'm coming here. Okay, so why did you come? I said okay, because they don't have college there. So then he goes, like how in America they have those thoughts. This guy goes, so you roam around there on camels? And I was like even if that made sense to you in your head, you're like not a kid, you're 18 years old. Like I was like, are you kidding? He's like, no, I'm serious. So I'm like, so these are just like, these are funny incidents, but of course there is a lot of, like, I'm a non-vegetarian, so people will sometimes have
Oh
that
my
thought.
God. I have to interject in this, right? So I keep talking about, like, one of the experiences I had was when I worked in Poland. And initially I went on an internship and then I worked there for another year. I still remember my Polish friends like having sheer horror on their face when they found out that I eat chicken. They're like, but you're Indian. So I was like, yes, and Indians do eat meat. But they were just like, oh my God. Like, it was just that they were completely betrayed by whatever they knew about Indians. And I mean, come on. Like, at this point, also, it's very hard for me to sound Indian, right? Even though I've spent like 10 years living here, because everyone's like, what is this accent, and where exactly is it from? So I can totally this, and I think, you know what, honestly, we can do just like an entire episode just on our experiences. But I want to just move, or at least fast forward slightly, right? Because while we talk about all of this, right, and we're talking about, say, even the 90s and 2000s, we're talking in 2022, and we're all parents now. And I want to understand, like, especially now, at least I live in India, right? So with my son, it's slightly different. But you're a mother of two. How different or similar have you noticed it with their upbringing, right? Because you brought up a couple of times that it's different. The kids think differently, right? So how would you attribute at least the similarity or differences between your childhood to your children's childhood in the US? If you could start off with that, I think.
I think the first difference comes in the fact that I am very mindful of what we do in our house. Like our parents would just do things and we would just go along with it because, that's just how our upbringing was. Compared to me raising my kids, knowing that, they will be questioned at times about the choices they make, the celebrations they do, the festivals they celebrate. So, like in my home, we celebrate Christmas as grandly as we celebrate Diwali, because I grew up next to a Christian household, and it means a lot to me. It's not that I celebrate because to give my kids gifts. So I always make sure they know that that there's a reason why we as a Hindu family celebrate Christmas, and we talk about Jesus and his life stories and things like that. Uh, as far as the kids' thinking is concerned, uh, it is interesting that when they sit on the bus and when they are at playdates at my home, you'll see many kids bring up their culture in different ways. So that is why I feel it's even more important for me to empower my kids with why we do things. Uh, that's different. So, like, we intentionally chose an area to live in which was diverse, and now my son goes to a school which has a little bit more of Indian crowd, and he keeps telling me, and I was very shocked when he said that to me, which is similar to what you said. But you have to remember when you hear this that uh, we are in USA, right? With most kids similar to himself, but he still says, "Mom, I don't feel as Indian as they do. My thinking is different than them." And that is why I brought up the earlier topic where I said that there are Indians who really hold on to their culture, and they have a very different way of looking at things versus when you are multicultural and you are open to different thoughts and different cultures, and you bring that into your home. I brought a book home about various religions the other day, and my son, we had a conversation, and he read through the whole book, and he had very mindful conversations about, why do you think they do this, and we discussed it. I said maybe this is why, and then I thought, okay, you know what, I need to find someone and ask them a couple of questions so that we know better of how I should answer them. So those are, I think, some of the ways in which we're different. And food, of course, uh, is multicultural in my home because I'm a foodie. So I love the fact that my kids are exposed to different kinds of foods earlier itself. And of course, celebrations, like I already mentioned, the books we read everything we can get our hands on. I We watch shows that are in Telugu or Malayalam with subtitles. We watch French movies with subtitles, and I'm glad that my kids get that view into different worlds because we haven't been able to travel recently. Of course, I think those are the major differences, I guess.
So, Aditi, I want to kind of take this conversation, a little forward. Um, it actually reminds me what you just said. It reminded me of that film American Desi, which had Carl Penn in it. Not sure if you've seen it, but from your expressions, I'm assuming you've experienced that film, right? And even today, when I watched it the first time, I had a great laugh. Honestly speaking, the second time I watched it, I started picking up nuances, and that one thing that really stuck in my head was ABCD, right? American born, confused, desi, and I was like, oh my god, these people must be feeling somewhere
Yeah.
that they are always going to be in between, and acceptance is going to be a bit of a challenge, right? When they grow up, obviously, then you get more mature and everything. But today, parent of two kids growing, what are the preparations that you are doing as a parent for your kids especially the fact that you are a third culture kid, Kuwait, India, US, but your kids are proper American, right? But obviously, the whole Indian origin aspect is very strong. So, have you thought it through? Do you think you need to prepare
Yes,
them for the
definitely,
future?
which
What's
is
that
why I
process
will
like?
plug my books in here because every single book comes from that foundation. Is because I truly believe that we never change. Like I go in a place, I go in a party even now, and sometimes I feel out of place. And I say that we need to empower our kids to know that they belong no matter how they feel in a room. And that is why we need to prepare them and have these conversations so that, I mean, it's like being in an interview, right? If someone asks you a question, you might know the exact answer, you might not know. And you should be able to get a ballpark, you know answer to whatever is being asked. So when my son is questioned about why does he eat non-veg, or why does he celebrate Christmas, or why, any why, or when someone says, "Oh, your name sounds funny," or "Why do you do certain?" "Oh, you're Hindu, so in your home this and this happens." I want him to be able to answer with conviction that this is how it is in my home, and that's fine. And sometimes not answer and be okay with the person having that stereotype in their head and being on their merry way, because you cannot change everyone's viewpoint. A lot of people come and ask me that, I get a lot of moms sending me messages that, "Oh, this is happening with my child. What do I do? How do I help them deal with the situation?" And my answer is 99.9% mostly that only thing you can do is empower your child. You cannot change the world around them. You can help them see the world differently. And each of my children's books is around that topic, where it is either body positivity using culture and science. And because I do believe that facts and fiction and culture can all be done together, and it can help children learn and grow. And so reading is a that is the most important preparation. I say that lived experiences, I'm not saying diverse animal books, I'm saying lived experiences. Read more. And as parents, please read books. I see enough, and don't read books also. Just read blogs. If you're not into reading, read a magazine, read an article, but be mindful about what you're consuming. And of course, mindful conversations with your children about why you do what you do, and be understand the fact that they are growing in a different world than yourself. A lot of parents have this misconception that, "Oh, my house is going to be exactly like how I grew up, and we have to carry forward those traditions, and we have to do things this way." But you don't have to, you choose to, and you need to know the difference between the two. And as long as you mindfully do that, I think it's fine, because at the end of the day, and please don't bring down other cultures. If you're a vegetarian, that doesn't make you better than a person who eats non-veg. If you follow your culture perfectly to the T, and that doesn't make someone who doesn't choose to, or who chooses to do something different, lesser than. But that, when you say, "Oh, I'm so proud of you being vegetarian," I don't understand why someone would say that, or non-vegetarian for that matter, is because you're indirectly telling a child that, okay, so if I'm proud of you doing this, that means the converse is bad. So anyone who's non-vegetarian is bad. I'm happy with the choice you're making. I'm accepting of the choice you're making is different than saying what you are doing is the best thing in the world and everyone else is not that great. So that is where all the bullying happens, I believe. My son got bullied by other Indians that, "Oh, why are you eating this food?" Or why do you not
Wow.
speak Hindi? You don't speak Hindi because your mom speaks Hindi, but you don't speak Hindi. And he said, "But in my home we speak English." Why? Because my husband and I speak in English. English is both our first language for some reason, his, but me, because I raised in Kuwait. So people don't understand that. And I was told by a person, by a mother of my own age, that, "Oh, you're a stay-at-home mom, but your kids don't speak Hindi still. How is that possible?" I'm like,
Wow.
"Dude, like there is no logic. The logic is that
What's the
my
logic?
way is the best way." And unfortunately, a lot of us fall into this trap of thinking this, that my way of parenting, or my way of living, or my way of following my culture and traditions is the best way, which is unfortunately not only not right, but it is not a good example for your children.
Yeah, very true. I mean, I'm like appalled, honestly, and especially when you think about it, this is not even happening, like, say, countries that we grew up, right? This is happening in the States. So when it's like, oh, why don't you speak? But I always say this, right? When a lot of people ask me, why don't you all do Pops in a Pod in Hindi? Well, I didn't grow up speaking Hindi. I had to learn it in school, right? So I can completely, again, relate to what you're talking about. But I want to touch upon a couple of things that you brought up. And you know what? Feel free, full self promotion time, because that's primarily why we got you on the podcast, right?
Oh,
Is
thank you.
and just going back, because I realized you've had a very interesting journey, starting off as a blogger, right? And you talked about just the community in there also. I mean, the reason Nader and I, when I was talking to you, said that the reason why we started this podcast is because it was a great way for us to talk to like minded dads. And unfortunately, we realized that there are far and few, right? What was that journey like for you, going from blogging, finding the community, and then finally like publishing the books? If you could kind of tell us about that journey, I'm very curious to know.
I came to US, and I think this is pertinent to our earlier conversation as well, because I did not have a visa to work, and I have always loved writing. Like, my husband knew even when before we were getting married that that was a secret dream of mine, that someday I would love to be an author. So when I was sitting at home, he was like, why don't you think of pursuing writing? Why don't you? Because I was the kind of person, I would sit in Barnes and Noble, which is a bookstore, and I would be like sitting and making notes about writing and how to write books and how to develop characters and things like that. And so he would say that why don't you get into blogging? It's very in now. This is 2007. I started blogging when Orkut was a thing. I'm not kidding you. Yeah, and I'm still
Everyone listening, suddenly I'm telling you, if you know or the Orkut reference, you're the same age as us, or even older. Other than that, I'm sorry, you're Gen Z.
Uncle,
So
uncle, and
Orkut,
auntie.
for everyone's reference, was the one of the earlier social media platforms pre Facebook, back when Farmville was a thing. So yeah, I started blogging then, and I found I had my blog was on blogger.com, and I used to exchange feedback with fellow bloggers. So that was the first way I started. So in 2007, that's how we began. And then slowly, I was like, no, this is cool. And I started taking classes, and I started doing courses. And then I got into freelance writing. And it was amazing because I was doing something I loved, but I was applying for publications like Huffington Post, Thrive, uh, and all the local ones also, and no one was accepting me. I got like 65, 70 rejections. Like, no one would even respond. Like, half the people didn't respond, half the people would not accept. Uh,
Wow.
and then one of my articles about teaching kids about consent and sexual predators went viral, pretty much in those days what viral would be. And uh, and then I applied for the same article for Huffington Post, and it got accepted there as well. And then life was kind of different after that, because once I got accepted there, then many doors opened. And I finally Ariana Huffington left Huffington Post and started Thrive, and I applied to her personally, and she accepted, and I got an email from her saying that I love your article, and it was about unplugging and being an empowered business owner. And back then I had started raising more children, I had just started the idea. So she was like, this is great work, and I loved it, and that was one of the first big validations I got, that Ariana Huffington is writing to me.
Yeah.
And then from there, of course, Raising World Children was a collaborative platform. It was a lot of work, but it was amazing to see all these stories coming out about how people were using mythology, or how they were celebrating traditions in multicultural homes, and what it means to be biracial or marrying outside your religion. And then, of course, the natural transition was to writing books. And my first book, Strong Roots Have No Fear, was almost like, it is actually a love letter to my kids, because uh, I always say, people often ask me, like, how do you know which book to invest in first? And I say, like, if you die tomorrow, which is the book you want to make sure is out right now, that is the book you should invest in, no matter what, whether it's marketable, not marketable. Because that's a book, like, even if
Wow.
it doesn't do good, you'll be happy. Like, you'll be like, acha, your soul will be content, whether if it sells or not. And people loved the book. It got a couple of awards. And then, of course, picture books was something I wanted to because I wanted to create picture books that were a marriage of science and culture, which two, three of my books are. The first Sparkles Me series is about how mythology and facts go together. So how our skin sparkles uses science and mythology to explain to kids why we all are different skin colors. Smaller Tall We Sparkle, after all, is about how our height is affected by our culture and our genes. And Sparkles of Joy is my favorite because it's about how Christmas, Hanukkah, and Diwali are similar and yet different. And it's wonderful
Whoa.
celebrating with your friends. And of course, now Amaya's Two Worlds is actually about me. So that's a book that I wrote just for me because it brought home the fact, and I wanted people to know that children who look Indian don't often feel Indian, and when they go to India, is often the biggest place where they feel that they're not Indian, and that's where they question themselves, and that's what happened to me. Where and I know my kids feel the same for sure because when their grandparents come, sometimes they can't relate to some things that are said and things like that, and have to be the mediator between that. That okay, they said this, but they mean this, and that kind of thing. But yeah, and of course, Amaya's Two Worlds is also about language learning because people don't often understand why third culture kids don't want to speak in their heritage language. And some people, and this is a comment I had got, which made me put that in the book, is that oh, kids don't speak in their heritage language because they're ashamed of their culture. And I was like, no, that's not it. They just don't think in that language. It just doesn't come naturally to me. Just the fact that you assume that just because they're raised in a household that speaks a language, they should know the language is unfair to them. And I'm really hoping that when more and more people read these books, especially Amaya's Two Worlds, they understand that being different uh, is beautiful, but it is also important for all of us to be empathetic to the challenges we all face. And that's what all of it is about.
Wow. I think that's like the best elevator pitch, an extended elevator pitch. But I think that's perfect. Just like in terms of just understanding. I mean, honestly, we all know the reason why these books should exist, right? But the fact that even in 2022 we're having these conversations and just trading notes across seas, literally, right, of how things are. So I think and I think, to be honest, right, with I feel with just the amount of information that's there, right? Even though there's so much information, let's be honest, everyone's rather make a TikTok or a reel or things like that and put share memes instead of like actually going through such things, right? Because that's what gets the attention of everyone.
Yep, and it's extremely sad. That's all I can say is, like back when we were not that popular, we used to have our articles picked up and shared on WhatsApp willy nilly, and it used to be heartbreaking for me that people don't even realize, copyright is a thing, or giving credit to someone is important. But okay, I was like, okay, chalo, at least people are reading these articles, and even if what at least that's what that's happening. But it's really sad that people would rather share a joke than something that provokes thought because they are fearful about, oh, I'm making a stand. But I think we need to have more uh, courage to stand up for what we believe in, and this new culture that's come up of banning people and canceling them needs to like die down, and people need to just relax a little and be open to agreeing to disagree with stuff. And I think that's social media is a blessing, but let's be honest here. It's also made everyone an armchair warrior.
you know I just wanted to add one final point from mine, which is that you brought up this whole aspect of reading. My wife and I are voracious readers, right? So obviously your kid is born to contradict you. She hates reading, she loves numbers. So and like she hates reading with a vengeance. Like she wants us to read to them, but you know how she's picking up reading now. She loves music. So I've made a playlist of her name, and any music that she likes, we add it to the playlist. And then she keeps asking, Papa, what is this song? What is this song? You don't remember that song, Papa? I said, no, I don't remember. You don't know how to read. So you'll have to now tell me when you read the song, you have to remember it, because I don't know what song it is. Obviously, I know what song she's talking about. So then on
Nice.
Spotify, she'll go to the song and she'll start reading the name of the artist, and the thing. And then she realizes that, oh, there are lyrics also. So while
Wonderful.
she's listening to music, she's trying to follow those words. Uh, and imagine if a 6-year old can do this. And Peter and I both teach as well, right? We teach in the same college. And it's a struggle to explain to young 20-year-olds the importance of reading anything. Anything. Just like looking at our faces, hoping that we will give them notes, and which they can just by heart and vomit back in their exam. So yes, the point that you're making about reading is so relevant, because that is exactly what we are constantly trying to do, with the people around us. And we're just trying to tell them that yes, you have the phone in your hand and social media, and as you rightly said, armchair warriors, right? That please don't be those people. There is so much knowledge in words, in people who have published, who've done their research, right? They're just making things so much more easy for you in terms of accessing knowledge. So thank you for that. I mean, I really appreciate that it's not coming from Peter and me, and there's another person who thinks very
Yeah.
similar to
So I
what
would
we
just like to
also
add
try
to
and
what you
advocate.
said, because I have written multiple articles about how to get your kids love reading, and I'm going to steal that idea and add this there. But I have to,
Please.
yes, I have to tell parents this, that if your child is not interested in reading, you just haven't found the right book for them. Like, a lot of parents have this misconception that reading Harry Potter is some kind of milestone in life, that your kid has to read Harry Potter in order to be called a reader. But comic books are reading, reading captions are reading, reading lyrics is reading, reading blog posts is reading. It, you cannot define reading by saying, my son is loves reading, he is constantly reading, but he does not read storybooks, he reads non-fiction. And that's absolutely fine. When he was 4 or 5, I tried to giving him storybooks and he was not interested. I took him to the library, I said, pick whatever you like. He picked up books about dinosaurs. He can tell you what dinosaur is, what height is, what eats what, everything. He can tell you about planes, he can tell you about anything he gets into, he reads everything about it. And if your kids are into Pokemon, get them Pokemon books. If their kids are into planes, get them plane books. You don't have to get them story books, you don't have to get them Amar Chitra Katha. I mean, if you get that, it's great, because I love them. But if you don't, it's fine. Let your kids pick the book, and let them lead with what they want to read. uh, and I think that's important, because, and even parents, like, lot of times when I'm selling books, they'll come up, they're like, oh, great work, amazing work, oh, I'm sorry, I don't read. I'm like, of course you do. You read, like, you're an adult, you read. You don't read these books, I get that, but don't say that I don't read. Like, that makes no sense. So so and that's a choice you make. Like I keep saying, it's a
Yeah,
choice you make about what you're consuming. So you are spending 1 to 1.5, 2 hours a day on social media. You can easily read a magazine in that much time. You can easily read a chapter book. You can easily read a great book with your kids. Why are we not thinking about that as parents? If we are trying to raise a generation of kids who are mindful and who think about what decisions they're making and make the right choices, why are we not being better examples?
totally. One of the things Nadir and I keep talking about is just how we need to be better examples for our kids, right? Because at the end of the day, kids just reflect what we do, right? And we're a great mirror in a way. So if we do that, then they'll kind of also do it. But you know what? I'm sure this can go on for another hour. So I have one last burning question for you, Aditi, and answer it however you choose. We just to come a full circle, right? And this is something I talked about on the last episode, is the concept of home, right? As someone who's spent like close to half his life living in various different countries, till date when someone asks me where is home, I struggle with that idea. So is that something that you struggle with also, or what's home for you?
We were having this conversation pre-recording where I said, for me, Kuwait feels like home. But to be very honest, I have never been confused. Like I think Nadir, but I might be wrong. I'm sorry, but you brought up the concept of ABCD, and I really used to hate it growing up. I'm like, what is there to be confused about? Because I really believe that no matter what your passport says, no matter where you've been, it is your values that define you as a person, and your home and your family. So as long as you're with family and you have your values intact, you're good. So and to be honest with you, Richmond, I have been here 15 years, and I think this is the longest I've lived in a city. So now, if anyone asks me where home is, Richmond, Virginia, in USA is home for me, because that's where I've spent the longest time in my life, and I've raised my two beautiful kids here, and my husband and I have built our life here. We've moved from apartment to townhome to house. We got a dog. uh, we've done so much. We've actually, like I said, built a life here, and it's just wonderful that we've done that. So I believe people need to remember that home. So no matter where you are, like a lot of people are always like, oh, my US mein hu, but I'm sorry, I went to Hindi, but my heart is in, I'm Desi by heart, and my heart is in India. I get that. I get the feeling, but you need to remember that your home and what you have done here carries a lot of value. And I don't think there's enough appreciation of that. If there was, then I think that confusion would never happen, because there's nothing to be confused about.
Wow. I think, you've left me and a lot of our listeners with a lot to think about. So I think that's a great way to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much, Aditi, for sharing your experiences and your life with us, honestly, because there's so much actually you've shared in this short conversation.
Thanks, Aditi. Really appreciate that you advocate reading. I think I really respect people who do that, because we feel so strongly about that. And whatever that you're doing, we wish you the best for
Thank
that.
you.
And yes, absolutely. I think you and everyone else have to be respected for their values and what they stand for, and not what geographical location they belong to. So I think that also is a great message. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
But
Yes.
one last plug: how does everyone who's listening to this episode, wherever in the world they are, get a hand of your books and the lovely stuff that you've been talking about? How do they reach out to you?
They can find me on raisingworldchildren.com, or my Instagram handle, which is the same, which is Raising World Children. And of course, my name is pretty much on Instagram and Facebook as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to DM me. I'm always happy to answer people, because I know that it's a struggle, and it's always nice to have a friendly person on the other side, which I hope I am. But I try to help with the limited experience I've had in life. And because I know there's a lot more to experience and there's a lot more to do. But I'm always here. If anyone needs any kind of help with their books or with their parenting, I'm always here.
Awesome. And on that note, everyone knows how to reach out to Nadir and me. We're at popsinapod@gmail.com.
And just like Aditi, we are also on social media. Just search for Pops in a Pod and you'll find us on Instagram. And yeah, thank you for listening in. And hopefully, we will see you guys again, or at least you can hear us again next week.
All right, then. We'll see you guys.